Hi everybody, this is Dark Guards, and we're back with another video. Now I gotta do some testing in order to actually get ready for, I want to say an alpha release, because it's not a beta release yet for Atomic Science. But during the testing I figured, you know what, let's go ahead and show off how to use the mods to those of you that actually do end up downloading the alpha, or downloading the beta that I'm going to end up releasing sometime next week. I actually have some grasp of how the mod works. I'm not going to cover it in too much detail, so I'm not going to go into like all the parts and how they work. But I am going to show how to set up the basic machines and actually get things going. So we're going to start with the processing chain, because it's the very first thing you probably actually want to get going. You don't want to build a reactor right away and actually get it set up, because if you have no fuel, you're not really going to do anything. However, if you do kind of get fuel, say you borrowed fuel from a buddy, I guess you can go straight to the reactor setup. But the fuel processing chain is going to at least be important to sustain your reactor if you actually have one. And it's a pretty simple process. Now, if you want to do the basic process of just getting some fuel going, so you don't really care, these are the only two machines you need. You just simply need to make sure you have an item duct going between the two of them. Actually, you need a fluid duct. So you get a fluid duct going between the two of them, because you're going to be outputting hexafluoride. It would be important to maybe get some servos, that way you can auto output. The machine does come with the ability to output, but it's not set up at the moment to run efficiently, so that way I'm going to leave that for another episode to talk about that. But you get a little servo in here. You of course can set this to auto output, but you want to put a filter on this, so I'm going to go ahead and get some item for filtering. You of course could get this filter however you want to do it. It doesn't really take a lot of effort to actually get the filters. And we're going to do this by doing the item cell. So I'll show you how you would actually go about doing this if you were getting ready to do it right away. Let me see if I can figure out... Well, we're going to need water anyways for this process. So we'll go ahead and do that to empty the cell. And we're going to put the cell in the... I think this is the output slot we're going to use. If this turns out to be the wrong slot, we can very easily actually get around to doing it separately. So let me go ahead and get the ore. So if you were doing this process... Right now the machines don't use power, but as soon as power is enabled for the machines, really what you would do is just connect wires up to it. I do plan to support all power systems. However, the plan for how the power is going to be supported is via a lab conduit bus. And what this will be is it's really just a way we're going to end up doing it, so that way it's not as hard to program. Because actually implementing power support on every machine would require a bit of extra work that I'm not really ready to do at the moment, so we're going to do this in another way, and then I'm going to look back at it. I may actually, before we even get to even implementing the bus lab conduit buses, which will basically just be a fancy way of saying wireless, I may actually decide to pull that feature and just put power directly on the machine. So this is just kind of talking the talk. But to get this going, you got your ore, you got the machine set up, you just put the ore in here, and this will start processing. And now you've basically got the basic setup right here going already. You will need, of course, to try to get rid of this output material, because this will produce the hexafluoride. And this, so it looks like this is going to be the material tank. I'm going to color code these at some point to make life easier. So this is the other tank that we got that. So let's go ahead and grab another cell of water. You can actually craft these cells, so the recipe for these is just 2 empty cells and a fluid. I'm going to make sure that I do put an empty cell in the creative tab at some point that is a fluid cell. The reason you can't just take a normal empty cell is a normal empty cell is pretty much just a glass cell and is actually used as a crafting item and not actually used as a fluid item. So this will actually say fluid cell, and it's very important, and then you put that in there, and that'll give you uranium hexafluoride, which you can then take and actually stick in here to get your filter. And then you want to set this up to whitelist, so that way that's the only fluid coming in there, and then you set to ignore it, it will actually start pumping that out. So when that actually does produce, it will pump out if the thermal expansion pipes would actually work for once. There's been quite a bit of issue with these actually getting to work, and I've been told this is actually a problem with the mod itself and not my mod, because even connecting these to like vanilla stuff or connecting to Buildcraft stuff, they have a tendency to fail. And if they do fail, you can sometimes just do this and it will start working again. I might also have to come over here and do this. Theoretically, this is what would happen if the machine was cooperating. Let's go ahead and stick some more water in this. And of course you wouldn't be manually pumping water in this, you would actually go ahead and get yourself like some form of water input. An important thing to note, what you actually do want to do with this, and when you do get this set up, is you would actually want to recycle the water from the toxic material. So this is actually contains water, and you can actually recycle the water from this step. And if these pipes are actually going to work, let's go ahead and do this again. And let's try this again. I think these are, yeah, these are fluid ducts. It's really weird. This was like working like 5 minutes ago. You can see the importance of testing, though, is that this is not doing what it's supposed to do. So we're going to do the other way. So there is another way to actually activate this and get this to work. The reason why I didn't want to show it is because this is not going to be the way it's actually going to work in the final version. I just have basically a dev way to actually enable the fluid. So I do know that this actually is working, it is actually outputting, and this actually will do that, and I can also stick that in there. That shell should have drained. Another bug I'm going to have to fix. But this will continuously produce hexafluoride as long as you keep water in it. And you put that, and that's your basic setup. You would have one of these. Of course, you would have waste material that you would have to get rid of if you didn't want to actually take care of the waste. So you would have some kind of disposal system here. You need to dispose of the toxic waste as well. And this would create your pellets, and then once you get your pellets, you can basically take these, and you would craft it with some cells, which this is actually the wrong recipe. This is actually supposed to be 9, but I'll fix that later. And so create your fission rod, and your fission rod is what you would stick inside the reactor to get it to start running. Now, to get a bit of a better setup for this, what you would actually end up inevitably doing is instead of running this current setup here, let's go ahead and break the machine as well to get it completely reset, is that you would be running everything through an extractor first. The reason for doing it through an extractor is this actually increases the amount of material you get. So you get 3 yellow dust out of this process, and then when you run the yellow dust through this machine, instead of getting 600 yellow or hexafluoride from it, you will get 750. So you get 150 extra, which will almost get you enough to make another pellet. So you almost get an entire another pellet out of this. And then if in the future I will be increasing the speed, and this also the output will be randomized just a little bit, so there will actually be even more of a bonus to actually taking your time to run it through this machine and then into this machine. This machine also requires water. Let's go ahead and actually just dump water bucket in here. Yeah, that way I can test to make sure that feature actually does work. This will go ahead and produce the waste material here, which is not what we wanted to pump in the machine. Actually, what you want to do between these two is use a item duct, and then you would want to use a fluid duct going into a waste disposal off of both of these. Let me go ahead and put this here. And this is where you would need another servo, and unless you can just set it to output, you don't need to filter it, because what you want is the yellow stuff, which I must be using like an older version of thermal expansion, because these pipes are breaking a lot more today than they should be. I might actually be, because this is a very old test environment. We're using an actual test environment, not in a debit kit, so this is actually multi-MC with mods in it, which is the whole reason for testing. So this will go in here. This actually also needs water as well in order to run, which you can just feed water into it manually. And this will start running. These recipes are also not hard-coded, so if another mod developer wants to come in here and add recipes, there is the option to do that. This, of course, will produce toxic waste, hexafluoride. Hexafluoride will be pumped back into this machine. Theoretically, that's what should have happened. I'm going to guess there's some in there, it's just such a low value we're not seeing it. Because it does output 250 is what it outputs, and that probably is not enough to render down here on the bottom. So let's go ahead and actually get this set up with a lot more water. Go ahead and put that in there. I may actually end up adding right-click interaction for the buckets in the future just to make this a little easier. But at the moment, this works really well. So you get the hexafluoride. Hexafluoride should be outputting. I get the impression that the pipes are just not doing what they're supposed to do. There we go, and that should work. So here's your more advanced setup that you would get a little bit of bonus out of it. Not too hard to set up, 3 machines, just some pipes between them. And of course you would have your waste disposal, which you would have to start taking care of at some point. And we're going to take care of that by just going ahead and putting some tanks up. If I can find the tab I'm looking for. It doesn't really matter what tanks you use, any fluid tank will work. You could basically use BuiltCraft off of this if you wanted to. So this will actually output this. In order to get the boiler to start outputting for us, I set this up to do a slime ball, which I'm going to set this up. This will be wrench behaviored more than likely. I would like to put a GUI in here that you can do, but I'm going to do that later because I don't have the time at the moment to actually get a nice GUI going for you. The plan would be if we can pull out a thermal expansion machine, because I think the thermal expansion machines have this ability. It's been so long since I've used these, and it's not what I wanted. That's also not the... One of these is an energy cell, I think. Or am I thinking of a mechanism? Yeah, down here is where the energy cells are. So these have a little GUI in them where you can select what side these are. And yeah, we're down here, configuration. They'll have it output something like this. It won't actually be like this because I don't like the pop-up system here. It's really cool. It works for thermal expansion, but it also requires you to have integration with whatever mod is over here. So you notice how that opens and shuts. That's a lot of extra code. More than likely what we'll do is we'll do something like this over here, where instead of this popping out, there'll just be a button. You'll click a button and then there'll be a full GUI that would show this information. And that would be on each of these machines, so you can control the inputs and outputs, because all of these machines have inputs and output capability on them. The code is there. As you can see, I can do that without hitting stick and output stuff. But that gets your process set up, and of course you'd have this fluid, and you can just do whatever you want with this fluid. Now, if you actually want to recover this fluid, because this is an actual processing step to this, you can actually take this fluid and do something with it. So this is going to output sludge is what this is, or one of these steps is supposed to. Let's go ahead and get a whole bunch more water in this. I wonder if floors stack. Aha, floors do stack. That's distilled water, though. I just went a lot of water. Yeah, I saw these while I was looking through the mod, and I wonder if these actually do work. Ah, you can't suck the water out of them. I'll have to make sure that code is actually added here at some point. So what we're just going to do is just grab some more buckets. I don't want to hook up pumps to this because I want to show a feature here in a second that will be really useful. So we get that running, so that's producing just a little bit more sludge. So that should produce sludge, and that should have outputted. Yeah, so we start seeing the mineral sludge here. Since this is toxic mineral sludge, the plan is to actually make this output radiation at some point. It'll be a really, really, really low amount of radiation, though, so it won't be enough to actually cause you harm, but it'll be enough there that you will have an effect actually being produced. The radiation we're currently actually getting, by the way, is actually coming from this reactor over here. As you see, I get closer to it. Let's go ahead and get rid of this tree here so we got more space. Move over here, like these. So now we have the sludge, and we have the basically contaminated mineral water. There is actually several fluids in this mod now. So there's the contaminated, or toxic sludge, I think is what it's called. There's reactor contaminated water, there's contaminated water, and there's mineral contaminated water. And there's a few other ones that are unrelated to what we're doing right now. Each has a different purpose in the mod and actually does do different things. With the actual sludge, I believe what we actually do is we're going to pump this into a boiler. And this will give us the ability to actually turn this into contaminated water, so we can pump this right back over here, saving ourselves a little bit of time. And of course we need to actually set this to output. And this should output, I believe, directly into the output tank, so we can just do this. Well, maybe not. We'll see what it does real quick first. Let's get it at least sucking the material out of the thing, which we need in our servo. Probably should use an upgraded servo, is what I probably actually should be using. So I'll get that in there, and that'll just start processing right away. Because what you're doing with this step is you're trying to boil away as much of the water out of the solid material as possible, and you get the solid material back, which is what also is generated in this step as well. So you would actually end up creating a pipe network at some point to deal with this, which this will be pumped into another step here in a second as soon as we get to that. So this will create more of the toxic waste here, which we need to output, and this is being in the waste tank, so I think what we can do is use a slime ball to activate this. I'm almost even tempted just to leave the slime ball thing in here just because it would be such a weird thing that you would have to do. So that'll give us more contaminated water, and of course we got that. But that'll start getting rid of that sludge for you, so you don't have to dispose of it in like a void tank or throw it into like the trash can or something, some way to get rid of it. You actually can convert this down into a basic material that you can start to deal with. So we got the contaminated, and this is going to be put into, I believe the centrifuge is the next machine, if I remember correctly. I should have probably pulled up the document beforehand that I wrote and actually read through it really quick to make sure I wasn't skipping a step. We're going to find out very shortly. This is completely unscripted, by the way. I know a few people like to script their videos, and this is not really meant to be a tutorial. This is more of just kind of like a follow along and watch me as I develop stuff. So yeah, I got it right. So you put the contaminated mineral water actually into this, and we can actually check the name of this real quick. This is, yeah, this is actually a contaminated mineral solution. So what you're all doing with this is you're centrifuging it, and you're getting the heavy solids to come out of the solution into the solid material, which you get more toxic material, and then you get water back. And this is the reason why I didn't want to actually put any system up and connect it to this to actually feed water into the system, because what you would do is actually build your system to recover 100% of the water you're using. And I actually do have the code set up that if somebody wants to come in here and decide that it's not 100% recovery, there is settings to change how much water you get back out of every step, how much contaminated material you get back out of every step, how much everything you get out of every step. But we can go like this, and we can feed the water back in, so that way we actually do have water again. And of course, if I didn't mess that up, you could put a couple more buckets in this, that way your system actually did have a bit of water in it to start with, so that way you don't have pauses, because say for example you weren't running at 100% power efficiency, you may have like a slight hiccup and you would have to wait for the machine to run. So you can do that, and of course I'll get that, and that's going to run through that process. That'll start to output yellow, right? Or yellow dust, and this will output of course the hexafluoride, which will create your uranium pellets, and of course it will create the toxic material. Now, how to get rid of the toxic material, because that's going to be another process, because we've got rid of the sludge and now we've got rid of the contaminated mineral soil. Now we have this toxic material left. There is a way to not necessarily get rid of it, but do something with it, so that way it's not just 100% wastage. And this is with the chemical extractors. So you'll use a chemical extractor again, and you'll go ahead and start outputting this into there. And let me go ahead and get a servo here. And apologies if you can hear that blender in the background. Even though I have a somewhat of a recording schedule I like to do, nobody really cares. So people in the house will run machines. So that should output, if this will work. There it goes. Yeah, I swear the thermal expansion pipes are broken. And it may just be the version I have, it may not actually be the modded total, they may have already fixed these problems. Of course, I'm running a much older version of Minecraft, so that's probably guaranteed was wrong. But this will create toxic waste. It actually will create a variety of things. It doesn't just output toxic waste. You'll see the arrow keep running, but it actually is consuming materials. All the machines are actually designed this way. They'll all continuously keep running, even if they don't have an output, just so that way you're not wasting cycle time. So that way, say for example, right at the last second you pulled the item out, it'll then do that stuff. But it has a high chance of dropping toxic waste. This will be changed in future updates of where it will drop toxic waste and the additional material at the same time. Let me get a chest here. And we can go ahead and start showing how this actually does work. So we put a chest here, that there. If you fail to kind of clear it out, it's going to drop toxic waste like 100% of the time. This will drop toxic waste, and then every so often what it'll do is it'll drop either stone dust or a mineral dust. So there we go, we got a mineral dust. We got some pulverized ferrous material. I only have thermal expansion here as far as I can tell, so we're not going to give a lot of opportunity. Actually, let me check what mods I do have. We do have IC2, so we should see some IC2 dust in here. Yeah, there we go. There's some lead dust from IC2, I think. I think it's IC2. It's been so long since I've played the mod, I actually am not sure what mods are what anymore. And I know that IC2 is kind of turned into this Greg Tech-like thing, which has got a ton of stuff. I'm seeing full dust in here, so I don't know what mod's giving me that. It may be one of these other, like, MORs. Let's check MORs. I don't recognize that dust. So I got thermal foundation. That could be actually, you know what, that could actually be my mod. Don't even recognize my own mod's content. Because we do have, like, still dust and stuff in our mods. I don't think it's it. There's impure uranium dust. That's... What is that even from? Hold on, I'm going to actually check to see if we actually have... I forget how to get to the... Oh yeah, here we go. We do have, by the looks of it, some Volts Engine content in here. So just hit dust and we'll see what mods they block to. Oh, they don't have the mod text in here. This does look like this has come from one of my mods, because we do have impure dust and we do have like small dust. We do have some things like magnesium, but it's been so long since I've looked at it, I actually am not sure what we do have and what we don't have. But this will produce random dusts. It does have a loot table system in it, so that you can customize the drop rates of each material. And I will probably start making it prioritize impure dust over pure dust, and probably actually block pure dust if impure dust do exist. That way it feels a little bit more consistent with what the mod design is. The mod design is basically what's happening is that when you're processing uranium, you usually get uranium ore with impurities in it, and those impurities are things like copper, silicon, iron, stuff like that, and you separate those out, and you separate those out in the boiling step by getting the hexafluoride. And that hexafluoride then gets pumped over here, but then you have everything else left. There's still stuff left in that material, and rather than just deleting it and getting rid of it, I decided we were going to have a waste processing step. But that's the whole process right there. Of course, you would run more pipes between each of the steps because you have more of this material, and you are going to have to kind of balance it out depending on the number of machines you want and the amount of material you want. Generally, you probably could just let this run and do whatever you want it to do, because you don't really need that many pellets to get a reactor started. This may change in the future because we're of course going to have to balance this entire mod and actually get it going into a certain step. Let me go ahead and grab another servo, and we should just be able to output this because it's only got one item output. Come on. There it goes. And that'll output back in there. I believe we have, these two machines also have. Yeah, this one has toxic material in it as well, which we'll have to output. And somehow we got toxic sludge into our pipe system, and this is the reason why it's important to actually put filters on things. So yeah, if you do this actual setup, you would put filters on this. Let me grab a filter. Trying to grab like the lowest grade filters here just so we can see what the system looks like. I'll have to really quickly just grab a tank and drain this off. And that should turn back into water. Cool. And then the filter should be set to... You can set them as whitelists. So we shouldn't be getting stuff back in here. And then an easy way to do this is we just grab something with water in it. And I don't even know if the universal cells... We're going to have to test universal... Oh, wow, they stack too. There's definitely something I want to test here in a second. But I want to grab just a generic bucket and do this, because that should work. That's set to whitelist. That's set to whitelist. And there we go. We're getting... I think we're getting water in here. No, we're not actually getting water. No, yeah, we're getting water. It's just being a little weird about how it's doing it. Because this thing isn't actually outputting water in a very quick rate. Generally what you want to do is you actually would want to build a couple of these. And maybe something like as simple as this and just stack them up. You don't have to be pretty about your designs if you don't care to. Yeah, you just do this. Oh shoot, that's, we want to get a wrench here and we're going to have to suck that material back out again. I think, yeah, we use a fluid vac. If I remember correctly, thermal expansion had that. It's one of the cool features I kind of like. Oh, it fixed itself. That's cool. So this should start outputting water at a much quicker rate. And there we go. Those are bees being fed water. That's pretty much how you would set this up. So this would be pretty much the full setup, is that you would have putting ore in this side. So ore comes in here. You create the yellow dust. The yellow dust will then come over here, which will be turned into hexafluoride, which will then be turned into pellets. You would then take the waste materials out, and you would just start processing them down and getting rid of them and slowly turning them in, and you get a slight mineral bonus if you wanted that actually as a system. And this could give you a little bit of ore back, a little bit of different variety going back, so it gives you more of a reason to also process down uranium, because uranium is now kind of like a catch-all material. And then once you got all this done, you can then take the pellets you want and just start taking and actually crafting the rods. Let's go ahead and grab this stuff. For the recipes, by the way, if you guys really want to know what the recipes are, just go ahead and open up NEI and look at them. The recipes are pretty straightforward. I still haven't balanced the fully out, and there's still a few issues I gotta fix. Like that should be a motor, and it's a repeater. The recipes do have vanilla alternatives for them, so if you want to install this mod with just vanilla, all of the recipes should work with vanilla. They also will work with Volts Engine, Mechanism, and somewhat with IC2. There's not a lot of support for IC2, and there's no support for thermal expansion at the moment when it comes to recipes. I will be fixing these, but if you do guys want custom recipes, there are mods that do exist to let you change the recipes to whatever you want them to be. Volts Engine even contains abilities, which I should make a tutorial at some point for. But once we get all the pellets and stuff, you pretty much just get a crafting grid. You want to get some cells. Fluid cell, empty cell, there we go. So get some cells. Cells are pretty cheap. They're basically 10 in a piece of glass. This is the same recipe that's from the older version. I don't plan to change it. It works. It's nice. I am going to upgrade the amount you're getting out at the end of it, though, because that should be a lot higher value. But take your pellets. There you go. Get a fuel rod, and you're good to go. So these fuel rods are designed to last for about 2 hours of actual game time. So you can actually get them, and you can see this one is, well, this one doesn't actually show its usage time, but that one's been running for a while. Just put it right in. There you go. You got a reactor. You should be wearing a hazmat suit when you actually are messing with the reactors, because the reactor will kill you quickly. You can see that my value is actually really high. About this point, my character would actually be dead if the code was actually implemented to kill your character off, which is not currently implemented at the moment of doing this video. But you get the hazmat suit. The hazmat suit recipes are pretty straightforward. You're basically using lead and cloth to do it in circuit boards. So this one, you're adding padding, you're adding lead to a leather helmet, which is going to hold it. Circuit board, because the display in the right hand corner is supposed to be activated via the suit, only if you're wearing the full suit. And each of the parts are pretty straightforward. These would be technically the air tanks. I may actually add better items for this. And pretty cheap recipe, but you put that on, that'll actually prevent you from dying. If you actually want to clear off your radiation if you're an admin. I forgot the commands. Probably because I misspelled something. I think it's actually what it is. There we go. It's rad and then set 0. There we go. So that'll set my radiation off, which will prevent me from actually dying if there was problems there. But you can see the radiation for the reactors. Reactors are pretty easy to build. You can build a reactor core. This is what the recipe looks like. Use basically a lot of microchips in it. This is actually does not look like the right recipe, so I'm actually have to go take a look at this and make sure this is correct. But you build this. You can stack these cores up as high as you want. The more cores you have next to each other, the higher the output. And if you put them next to each other, higher the output as well. These do basically work in a heat-based system, so they do generate thermal radiation that actually is being transmitted around. Same thing if you left your oven open and put a pot of water in front of it. Same as the general concept. And we can check the thermal values of these by using the thermostat. If you shift right click, it will tell you the block that you clicked on the side of. So if I actually right click this will tell me what the brick I clicked its value is. But if I shift right click the side of the block, it'll tell me this water block right here. Very useful because you can't actually click water, so you can tell what the value is. It will tell you the amount of heat that is being produced in excess of the environment. The amount of environmental heat. Each area of the map has different heat values. The current temperature of that in Kelvin, you basically minus about 300 something and you get Celsius, and then do math to get Fahrenheit. I will be adding a way to translate this for people who don't recognize the different standards. All of the units are actually in Kelvin though. It will then tell you heat to melt object, so you need this amount of energy you currently have with the environment heat plus the amount of heat, and the amount you actually need. It will then tell you how much vapor is being produced at the time. So we're producing 138 millibuckets of steam, which is a lot when you really think about it, considering that the Railcraft boiler does 20 per block, I think is what it does. And each of these is actually producing. And these are producing a lot. The particle animation is not always perfect. It's a little bit randomized. You end up finding that you get certain blocks that will produce more particles versus others. If you stack 2 reactors on top of each other and actually do this, it will fix the animation. Not exactly the perfect solution, but here's a solution. And now fix the animation. You can put as much water as you actually want into these and actually do really high amount of boiling point. Right now there is no code support to actually boil the block off, so this won't cause any block updates. That is probably not going to happen until we get later into the development cycle of this mod and actually put in a lot more mechanics for larger reactors. So small reactors will probably never boil off, but large reactors probably will start to have that problem, and you'll have to fix that by pumping more water in, but there won't be any block updates in that system. To actually generate power, how you would actually do this is you would either use the steam funnel right here, which is just not the final model of this. I gotta actually use stuff. This will actually capture the steam and you can pump it into pipes. So if you had a fluid pipe, which I threw away my fluid pipe, let's go ahead and grab one. And we're gonna grab one that we can actually see. So you can put a fluid pipe up here and it will actually produce steam, and you can pump this into something else. So like a steam dynamo, a turbine, maybe even a train from Railcraft. I'm not sure if you can actually do that. But you could actually do that, pump steam in that, and get steam working. You can pump the steam around your base, and then you can actually turn this into power again if you want to. There's no devices actually in the mod to do this because it's usually assumed you're using the steam funnel to support another mod. If you want to make power inside the mod, you use these little turbines here. Right now there's a universal turbine. This actually is not universal in terms of power. This is really just meant to work with the voltage and power system. And then there's an RF turbine. The RF turbine will only be enabled while RF is running. The reason for doing this is just so much easier to code than trying to make one tile support 5 different power systems. So there's going to be a turbine per power system, and then if people really complain, I'll merge them all back together. They don't look different at the moment. The plan is this will want to eventually have a RF recipe, and a model will look a little different. But the recipe for this is pretty straightforward. You pretty much would have a motor in the center if the motor was actually loaded, but I got the Ore Dictionary name wrong. And then some fins, and then some supports. And you would put these over the water sources. These will produce up to, or both of these can only produce up to 1 bucket worth of steam a tick. That's an upper limit to prevent producing too much power out of these, so it is kind of to force you to design your reactors so that way you're not producing a huge amount of power out of them. They do work by scanning down and checking how much steam is being produced, so the more water blocks you have below them that are boiling, the more steam you will produce, of course. You can check how much steam they're producing right now by clicking with a stick. This will eventually be changed to some kind of tool. I'll probably make the thermostat itself do it. I'll just call the thermostat a multimeter. It'll tell you how many millibuckets of steam is being produced and how much power wattage it equals. I think right now RF is a 2-to-1 ratio, so 656. No, it's a 4-to-1, I think. Whatever, it doesn't matter. You can do the same thing with steam funnel and actually tell me how much steam is in there, how much steam you're generating. You can look at each of these, and of course you can power this and stuff. So if we were actually using the RF one, we can hook this directly up. So let me grab some hardened flux cables, and then let me go back to the other tab and grab the RF turbine. Break a few of these. And then we can actually attach these, and oddly enough, their cables actually attach to each other. I did not know that. And we can get ourselves a battery box and actually watch this charge. You slowly see it charge. These do produce a ridiculous amount of power, which is entirely intentional because of, after all, nuclear reactors produce a lot of power. Everything is configurable, so if you're a mod pack maker and you want to change these, increase them, decrease them, balance them out, change how much heat's produced, those options will be available if they're not already available. And that's about it. So the reactors are pretty simple to start up. You can be as creative as you want with them. There is a lot of little quirks that you can play around with. Bricks act as an insulator. They do insulate a certain amount of heat, so heat doesn't travel through them very well. Heat does not travel through air very well either, so if you just want to leave an air gap between your reactors, that's a very good ideal. So if you were actually making a reactor, the ideal way would actually be to put an air gap here, so that way you wouldn't have heat escaping from your reactor. This also will help with radiation shielding. Radiation will eventually be blocked by walls and stuff, so that will eventually happen. Metal blocks do transmit heat better than normal blocks, so if you actually build a really big reactor and you want to actually have it so that way you're boiling more water off of a smaller reactor design, you can actually insert blocks into this. So we can do this real quick. This does require at the moment a reset of the reactor to update. So let's go ahead and do that. And then let me remove this so I can grab the other piece. And this should, in theory, start actually boiling. It's getting close. It is barely underneath the boil limit. Let's actually do this. This will be the easier way to test it. And reset. Theoretically, this is how this is supposed to work. But we don't have enough power actually out of the reactor to get enough heat to travel that far. There we go. So we got the water traveling over there. So normally this would only boil the water in a 3x3, but with that metal block we were able to extend the water boiling out. And you can actually check this, and these are actually producing 146. So this has transferred the heat through the metal block out here. It's actually also increased the amount of heat driven by these, and if I can remove these fines. So we're doing 164 here, but if we go over to this corner, it's 162, so it's a slight increase. Of course, what you could also do is switch this over to something like gold as well. There will be an advantage, disadvantage, depending on what you're using, so higher conductive materials won't necessarily be better than lower conductive materials, for the simple ideal that there will actually be consequences to certain things. For example, the melting point of gold is a lot lower than iron, so your gold block could actually melt. And you can actually see right here, 5.4 gigajoules out of 1. This block would technically already start melting if it wasn't for it. Of course, I've got to work on more efficient heat transfer between these. But you could actually get this working and transfer heat all around, have really cool reactor designs. What you also could be doing is doing something like this, where you had reactors on both sides and you wanted the heat to go from this middle block to the outside blocks and around. Heat fence will be introduced later on, which will also do the same job, but it will have a much, much higher heat transfer rate. And at that point, that's about all the content I got for you guys. Hopefully this has helped you understand how the mod works and has acted as a good testing bed for me to find all the issues that I've currently seen and repair them and get before the beta releases happening here next week.